Antoninus, one of Rome's best emperors, but his reign is almost forgotten, and he has been written off as a stopgap emperor. But no other emperor is so highly praised for his moral character, for which he earned the additive, pious. Happy the nation that has no history, and prosperous the years whose records are vague. The historians who treat of Antoninus's reign make practically no attempt to arrange their work in chronological order, but we've done our best to present the events in the order that seems likely, based on coins and inscriptions that can corroborate the written record. Antoninus was born in Lanuvium, just south of Rome on September 19th, 86 AD. But his family originated from Nemausus in southern Gaul, a family which, in its various branches, had held some of the most dignified and important offices of the Roman state. Antoninus's grandfather was the first in the family to hold office in Rome. He was consul twice. He supported Vespasian's bid for the imperial throne in 69, and was rewarded with a suffect consulship, plus an ordinary one under Domitian in 85. Antoninus grew up in a small village outside Rome, Lorium, and it seems like he regarded this as his home. He would later build a palace here during his reign. His father died relatively young. He passed away shortly after his consulship in 89. Antoninus's education was entrusted to his two grandfathers, and it seems they educated him on the most orthodox lines with the purpose of instilling his mind with a devout and simple spirit. Antoninus would have come of age in 101 AD, and would go on through the regular senatorial cursus honorum, but we don't have any written record of his career before 120 AD, when he was consul. He married Annia Galeria Faustina, called Faustina the Elder. Faustina came from a good family, whose origin, like that of his own, was provincial. But like his own, his wife's family had for several generations been resident in Italy, and its members had attained high official positions. They had 4 children together, 2 daughters and 2 sons, but 3 of them would die before Antoninus became emperor. Faustina the younger survived and later married Marcus Aurelius. After his consulship, Antoninus retired to his villa to lead a quiet life. But his retirement didn't last long. When Hadrian divided Italy into 4 divisions, Antoninus was one of the ex-consuls entrusted to one of these provinces. He was granted the district of Etruria and Umbria. It's unknown how long he held this office, but perhaps for several years. In 133 to 136 AD, Antoninus was proconsul of Asia. This proconsulship was one of the most honourable of all the provincial offices. As governor, he showed a steady hand and firm guidance. Matters were granted serious consideration. He turned his attention primarily to the material well-being of his province. Upon his return in 136, he was admitted to Emperor Hadrian's private council, by whose agency the practical business of the empire was mainly conducted. In this body, Antoninus soon gained the reputation of always advocating mild measures. Marcus Aurelius would later allude to the simplicity of Antoninus's tastes, both before and after he had become emperor, and notes in him the sobriety, truthfulness, and reserve, which had been the best characteristics of the Romans of the early Republic. Antoninus had climbed the cursus honorum, and due to the intrinsic worth of his character, and to the excellent manner in which he discharged all the duties of government which were entrusted to him, he was now one of the leading men of Rome. Hadrian didn't have any clear successor in his close family, so he adopted Saeonius Commodus and named him heir to the throne. But Saeonius died before Hadrian in 138 AD. So Hadrian had to look for a man qualified by personal popularity and by experience in public affairs to take on the imperial purple at short notice. Hadrian's thoughts naturally turned to Antoninus, who qualified himself in both of these respects. When Hadrian offered Antoninus the chance to be adopted and become the next emperor of Rome, he deliberated for some time because of the great importance of the request. After due deliberation, Antoninus accepted the honour and was adopted on the 25th of February 138 AD. But Hadrian's adoption had one precondition, that Antoninus in turn adopted Marcus Annius Verus, his nephew, and Lucius, son of Cneonius Commodus, who would become the emperors Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus. It seems that Hadrian hoped that Antoninus would be a stopgap emperor, just long enough for Marcus and Lucius to be old enough to rule on their own. Parts of the speech Hadrian gave to the Senate when he introduced Antoninus was recorded. "Fate has taken Cneonius from us, but I have found you an emperor, noble, mild, obedient, sensible, neither headstrong and rash through youth, nor careless through old age, Antoninus Aurelius." When Antoninus was adopted, he was also granted the powers that came with imperial power, that of proconsulare imperium and tribunicia potestas, and he did, in fact, but not in name, co-rule the empire, as Hadrian was suffering from some sort of illness that made him irrational and suicidal. There is the English proverb that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This notion did not hold true when it came to Antoninus, who only seems to have increased his sense of honour and duty with increased power and responsibility. Marcus Aurelius would later praise his adoptive father, that he set an example of how to preserve his character when emperor. "Be firm like him, of an equal temperament, pious, cheerful, kind, a despiser of empty glory, careful, accurate, diligent, and thorough. Bear blame and censure from others, as he did. Neither hurry nor delay, and let your tastes be simple." 4 months after the adoption, Hadrian died. On the 10th of July, 138 AD, Antoninus was officially proclaimed Emperor of Rome. Hadrian had gained a lot of ill will in the Senate, partly due to constant travelling and focusing on the provinces rather than the imperial city, and partly because of the division of Italy, which effectively had decreased the power of the Senate. His irrational behaviour in the last few months didn't win him any friends either, but Antoninus made it his duty to restore the memory of his adoptive father. He compromised with the Senate. Many of Hadrian's acts were reversed, and senators condemned by Hadrian were pardoned. The division of Italy was abolished, and it would go back to how it had been ever since Augustus. It proved hard to procure the deification of Hadrian. Antoninus entreated the Senate and threatened to refuse to rule unless they complied. Finally, the Senate relented, partly because of the respect they had for Antoninus, and partly the fear they had for the soldiers with whom Hadrian had been very popular. Antoninus made it a policy of always consulting and deferring to the Senate as much as possible, and he governed the state in such a peaceful and holy way that he was called Pius. Hence he was known as Antoninus Pius. Antoninus had begun his rule well. The Senate was happy with one of their own as emperor. He had long been one of them, and had lived among them once with no prospect of ever rising to any higher position. He could therefore fully sympathise with all their hopes and claims, and was willing to allow them not only a nominal, but even a real power. And the provinces were naturally friendly to a man chosen by Hadrian. Hadrian was, of course, well liked by the provinces. He had visited almost every part of the empire during his reign. Antoninus Pius was consul in 139 and 140 AD. In the latter year, together with his adoptive son, Marcus Aurelius, who was now 19 years old. Around this time, Marcus was betrothed to Antoninus' daughter, Faustina the Younger. Sometime in 140, some sort of disturbance occurred in Britain, yet our written sources are quiet on the matter. Pausanias, however, claims that the Brigantes tribe in Britain invaded Roman territory and were consequently deprived of most of their land. The Brigantes was a tribe north of Hadrian's Wall, and that the Romans built a new wall of turf, the Antonine Wall. Sometime during the years 140 to 145 AD, some sort of war was carried out against some German tribes along the Rhine. The nature of this disturbance is unknown, but it seems that the governor was able to deal with the Germans, with the forces stationed in the province. In his third year as emperor, Antoninus Pius lost his wife, Faustina. Antoninus was devastated at Faustina's death and took several steps to honour her memory. She was deified by the Senate, and an honorary column was constructed, the base of which has survived. On it we can see Faustina being carried by a winged figure up into the sky, symbolising her apotheosis. Games were held in her honour, and a temple constructed for her worship. In 147 AD, Marcus Aurelius had his first child, a daughter, and for this he was honoured by Antoninus Pius and granted tribunicia potestas and proconsulare imperium outside the city, effectively making him co-emperor. But notably, he did not gain the title of Augustus until the year 161 AD. Marcus's wife and the daughter of Antoninus, Faustina, however, was granted the title of Augusta at this time. The year 147 AD is also notable because it marked the 900th anniversary of the foundation of the city, and Antoninus Pius celebrated this occasion with all due splendour and magnificence. In the following year, 148, Antoninus celebrated his 10th year on the imperial throne. Games celebrating this occasion would have been held in the capital. Coins minted in the following years show elephants and lions that would have been exhibited during these games. These first 10 years had been marked by the quiet prosperity and relative peace throughout the empire, bar the trouble in Britannia and Germania. In 152 AD, a massive earthquake devastated western Anatolia. Smyrna, Ephesus, and as far north as Cyzicus and Bithynia were reduced to ruins, and that the whole configuration of the country was changed. Marcus Aurelius was put in charge of the restoration effort, and a few new buildings have been dated to this time, which would have been part of this restoration. Another earthquake had devastated Rhodes a few years earlier. The province of Mauritania had always been somewhat lawless territory owing to its sparse population and mountainous terrain. In 152 the situation was unbearable. The roads were no longer safe. The Atlas Mountains afforded an almost impregnable refuge for the bandits. An expedition was planned to deal with the bandits and warlike nomadic tribes of the region. The Romans succeeded in pushing the Mori westward towards the Atlantic Ocean. Shortly thereafter, perhaps in 153 AD, a revolt broke out in Egypt, and the prefect had been killed in the disturbance. Two of our main sources of this period are John Malalas and Aelius Aristides. They both claim that Antoninus went to Egypt himself to deal with the situation. A common misconception about Antoninus Pius is that he never left Italy during his reign. This misunderstanding is based on the writings of Capitolinus in the Historia Augusta. The Historia Augusta is an unreliable source in the best cases, and demonstrably wrong in the worst. So we have to assume that he dealt with this disturbance in person. It would make sense for Antoninus to go to Egypt in person. Roman emperors were hesitant to admit any Roman of rank to that province. Antoninus was able to deal with the rebellion in Egypt, and from there he travelled to Antioch, in Syria. The Parthian Empire was once again causing trouble in the east. The royal throne of Parthia had been taken as plunder during Trajan's campaign decades earlier. They requested that the throne would be returned to them. Antoninus had refused, whereupon the Parthian king invaded Armenia. The Armenian king had passed away early on in Antoninus's reign, so he had crowned a new king of Armenia. When Antoninus ordered the Parthians to retreat from Armenian land, they were forced to comply, or be at war with Rome. They were not ready to contend with the Roman legions. A number of buildings in the eastern provinces date from this period. Construction likely began when Antoninus visited the region. He was back in Rome in 157 AD. Shortly thereafter, a revolt took place in Dacia, though the rebellion was put down by Statius Priscus, the governor of the province. Due to this revolt, Dacia was to be reorganized into 3 new divisions. Of the remaining years of Antoninus Pius's reign, very little is known. His military activity in all parts of the empire had secured to him peace for the closing scenes of his life. His age rendered him unwilling to engage in anything more than the ordinary routine of business at home. When Antoninus Pius was 74 years old, he died on the 7th of March 161 AD, in his villa in Lorium. His reign was only surpassed in length by that of Augustus before him. If he was supposed to be a stopgap emperor to educate Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus, he succeeded, but probably lived longer than Hadrian had expected. But his adoptive sons were now ready for the responsibility of empire. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. we're making videos on all of the Roman emperors. Next video in the series will be on Lucius Verus.